Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm Zach.
And I'm Steven.
And I'm Robert.
And today we're talking about the new Star Wars Destiny. All right, well, what have you guys been up to this week? Start anywhere you want.
I mean, honestly, the landscape of our sphere of interest in tabletop games is as wild as it's ever been. And I think that this podcast reflects that. We've had the new LCG format shaken up by the L5R. We had a new LCG, L5R. We had shake-up of data, the way that packs are distributed with L5R. We had a shake-up. We had Arkham cards put in a book.
In a book.
We had the complete Netrunner reboot, which we've talked about.
We had a Netrunner. We had a revised core set and banned cards for the first time and all of that. So I mean, personal life is somewhat boring actually compared to what's happening professionally.
I'm ready to foil that.
That said, I did go on my first year wedding anniversary thing. We stayed in Tulsa and just went to a thank you. Stayed in Tulsa, went to a hotel and just hung out for all weekend. I don't know. I think
such a lovely place.
Well, you make a choice on vacation between just staying inactive,
doing or not doing,
or going and exploring and whatnot. So I think if your everyday life is probably as it should be, ideally in your early 30s, you're somewhat busy, right?
What do you need to chase things for?
And doing stuff, it's like
I just want some time off.
I just want time off. Yeah, I just want.
And you don't want to waste time traveling.
And on that note,
are you gonna go bowling alley?
Yeah, I went to a bowl in the alley, which is
oh right, bowling alley.
It's a concept. It's like, I guess these have been around obviously for a long time, but it's a modern version of the speakeasy concept.
Password?
Which is essentially there's
just
a nondescript location. This was called Bowl in the Alley, and there's literally just a bowl sign in the alley.
Where was that place you went to?
There's no signage.
After that song and performance show that your dad put on with his band.
Oh. Where did we go after that?
It was
Cellar Dweller?
That's what it was.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a place. It's very similar, right? It's that kind of a thing where you don't know it's there unless you know it's there. But Bowl in the Alley is going for more of the kind of super classy speakeasy. Bartenders making cocktails and sitting at a nice wooden bar, very dark, dim lit.
Cellar Dweller is dark and dim lit, but it's also just kind of like the underground bar. It's not like trying to be fancy.
It's more of a dive. Like, you're gonna get beer at Cellar Dweller, and this is a place where you are expected to get like a classic cocktail.
It's like a piano bar. Literally, the bar is on the piano.
Say old-fashioned sidecar, that kind of stuff.
Speaking of
Manhattans, etc. So I discovered, and it's also the place where the bartenders know what they're doing, so you can just say like, I want to try something new with rye whiskey or something like that. But anyway, I was like, I'm actually on the quest for kind of it's kind of like your karaoke song. You need to have your go-to drink at a nice place.
I believe I can fly.
Whether it's usually it's like an old-fashioned type thing. Hey, I'm supposed to be classy and looking cool here.
But I felt like that
I
was
can't
just
order a vodka
old-fashioned.
Red Bull. It is the old-fashioned.
What do you call that?
Vodka Red Bull?
That's a name,
Trash.
Right?
Trashy
that's
is
true.
what you call that.
That's
yeah.
definitely
Dumpster fire.
But effective. But I tried a Sazerac, Sazerac, which is essentially kind of a rye. It's an old New Orleans thing, maybe the earliest American cocktail, come to find out, depending on how you define cocktail.
I know exactly where I had that. I'll get to that in a minute.
Bitters, special bitters, Pachauds, whatever bitters it is.
Whatever, yeah.
Who could forget? Absinthe or something similarly kind of anise, and then it started out as brandy, cognac kind of brandy, and then it did. It was a special brandy from the New Orleans Strip, I think, and then it turned into rye whiskey because welcome to America.
Bourbon Street.
Yeah. And
wait, rye on Bourbon Street? What's going on?
It was excellent. The drink was so good. The drink was so good. It was so good.
Changed your life.
So I think I found it.
Yeah.
I think that's my drink. So
Quest is over.
We got dressed up and we did
embraced.
that one night, and then we did nothing else for the rest of the weekend. So
No, that's perfect.
used garbage television in a hotel, watching like Bravo.
Did you catch any Alaskan bush people?
Oh my gosh, no!
You
I would
wish
have
you
killed
did.
for bush people. It was like housewives and stuff, and sometimes it just is too much.
Alaskan
to
bush
even enjoy.
people is perhaps the finest show of all time.
Once you're punching fish, you can't really.
Alaskan bush people, Cheers, Seinfeld, Cosby, something like that.
Is that the order? Also of note, though, is Genesis. the role-playing system
Oh.
that
I thought it was the
FFG FFG is putting out. This essentially, if you guys are familiar with role-playing games, GURPS, generic universal role-playing system.
Whoa, that stood for
Yeah.
something? I have
Yeah.
no idea.
Wait a second.
It
Hold the
was,
phone.
It was a set of rules, and there are multiple entities that have attempted this. A set of rules that can govern any setting, right? And so they're trying to do this with Genesis, with their narrative dice system, which is not a new concept at all, but it's taking kind of all of these concepts so that they can fit them into various role-playing systems. Whether it's a Rune War system or a Netrunner system, you can function the same way. Same way, they released their rules for Magic on this couple of days ago.
Magic in the system.
Magic in the system. And it is so good. Seriously. So good. It's the kind of thing where, like, based on your successful rolls, failed rolls, you basically turn them in to cash in on effects, or maybe the GM does it, I can't remember. But, like, it makes Magic feel super unpredictable and uncontrollable, which I love. So, like, if something goes wrong, it could be that the spell doesn't cast until the start of next turn. Awesome, right? It's like, I intended to do this thing now, and then it doesn't happen, right? It could also be that you anger the spiritual energies, the mystical energies, totally backfires, and you take a critical wound. It could be that everybody within a 200-yard radius immediately knows where you are if they're attuned to magic.
It sounds like wild magic in the old D&D business.
So you try to do your thing, and most of the time I'm sure you do well, but when it can also always go weird and interesting. And I love that kind of stuff. So I wanted to shout that out. I think that's really nicely done.
I never did wild magic.
Yeah,
for the same reason.
But it feels like that.
Yeah.
Does it? Yes, it should feel, I think, like you are dipping into something that you're never fully in control of.
The way those narrative dice work, though, is like it's not like a D&D like success or fail. It's here are the successes and here's all the failures.
Yeah.
And so the better you get, the more you can mitigate that stuff.
Yeah.
And so you are more in control of the magic. But early on, it's like you can attempt the really crazy spell and maybe hit it.
Oh, so you can attempt, because I guess that was the foil with D&D, is that you must be this tall to cast the level 3 spell kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think we're out of that
Okay.
at this point. I think we've done away with a lot of those classic concepts. Now, I can't speak to that fully because I've been keeping up with the whole thing. They're just releasing segments, but I thought that was a cool way of handling kind of the next wave of, or really, it's not anything new. It's just I'm glad that they're doing it correctly.
Yes.
In my mind, at least.
Okay.
So that's me on the week.
Quite a week.
It's a good one. Yeah, you've been busy.
What about old Rojo?
For me, well, now that the seasons are turning and
You're so much happier.
Cold weather is upon us. Yes, I am truly that much happier. I hate summer with a passion. But conversely, I love the colder weather months and seasons as passionately, and it allows me to turn the oven back on and start cooking with it.
You're a baker.
I'm a baker, and just anything that comes out of the oven is generally going to be great. But then also, Steven's personal favorite, hot alcoholic beverages. Are now back on the menu. Last season, Jonathan and I both got
in the background over there.
very good at making mulled cider. But this season, something different, but similar. Mulled wine is on the menu.
I'm interested to see how this goes.
Going to be rolling out with it. And I was first into it and then not into it because I was thinking, it turns out incorrectly, that, wait, what's the point? Aren't you just going to evaporate all your alcohol? Because if you don't know, mulled wine is where you essentially heat it up, add some spices, and it tastes different and nice.
Like a pumpkin spice.
Exactly.
For booze.
What have you, but with wine or cider, that kind of a thing. It's very good.
I mean, you can infuse anything.
It's the same kind of thing, right?
But it turns out that is not true. My suspicions were ill-founded. You do lose some of the alcohol, but unless you're boiling it, which you shouldn't do anyway, protractedly, you retain the vast majority of your booze. Moreover, of course, you can add more.
Yeah.
So did you want to add some brandy? Did you want to add some nice dark rum?
That does sound great. So now you're effectively cooking alcohol.
Cooking alcohol with spices and adding more alcohol.
I can't imagine how good that's going to end up.
It's going to be.
Yeah.
We're trial run is tonight. I've had mulled wine before, but I've never made it myself.
It's essentially been a decade of getting to a point where we know what we're doing with booze.
I even bought new brandy.
Yeah.
I had the same brandy brand for about 2 years, and then eventually, just this last week as well, you mentioned sidecars a little bit ago. We'll be having sidecars as well when the afternoon's still a bit warm. But my brandy sucks. There's something about it, and there's a certain amount of alchemy in mixology where even if you're using the named, listed traditional ingredient, certain brands and varieties of have either a propensity to work swimmingly or not at all. And I had a not at all variety of brandy, and it frequently would just make this clashing flavor thing. It's like, who put soap in this kind of a thing? And it's just like, it's not good. But this new brandy does not have that feature.
All right.
Well, I'm very excited to.
It's very exciting.
And brandy is just spirit made from wine. Distilled wine, right?
Spirit made from fruit. So you can have apple brandy. Traditionally, brandy is made from grapes.
Yeah, that's what that makes sense.
A similar branch of the tree for the grape one. So for me, I actually, outside of watching Appa, which is Steven's dog this weekend, I actually played some Destiny, as you might imagine. This is before the FAQ madness that we will get to in a second. But we had a 2-player starter only event, and I will say it was magical.
Was it?
The only legal cards were in that box right there.
Okay.
The 2-player starter. And that effectively means if you chose light side, you had to play Elite Rey, Elite Poe, and if you chose dark side, it was Elite Kylo, Elite Phasma.
Yeah.
And I didn't win the tournament, but I had more fun playing that event at Destiny than I've had in quite a while with that game. And a huge part of that was strictly because it was constantly, I do a thing, you do a thing. I do a thing.
Oh, you're just you're just old-fashioned, Zach.
I am old-fashioned, but it was my favorite move.
Funny of me to say.
Because there's only so many. There's only so many options to put in your deck, right?
Yeah.
One of my favorite interactions in that format was there's a card called Clash. So it's 1 cost. I turn one of my dice to a side showing melee. I turn one of your dice from a side showing melee to a blank. But everyone in the game has 2 of these in their deck.
Yeah.
So the trick is, if we both have cards and money, if I play my Clash and you have Clash, you can play it and reverse it, right? It's a clash.
So you're clashing.
So the whole tournament, anytime I have Clash, I always sit on a money in that card. Because I know at some point, you're going to be bold enough to play yours.
Yeah.
And I'm going to anti-Clash you.
Yeah.
And it's just symptomatic. It was like, there's really a little back and forth, and then if you don't have another Clash, I'm the one that gets to do the damage. So
I think we're really discovering the strength of limited card pools. Really,
heck yeah.
Honestly.
A little bit of,
Monica?
restriction.
You do have to have restriction.
Accentuates, the creativity and the enjoyment of like, hey, we're all in this together rather than, net decking. We've talked about that.
How do you feel about net? No, I'm just kidding.
Terrible.
But the reality of even deck building was there were more choices to be made than I expected out of the 2-player starters for both decks, but also not so many that I had to spend an inordinate amount of time either searching the internet or building my own decks, which is my preference.
Right.
So it was just really fun, and everyone there was having a really good time. There were a lot of new players that were kind of new to the whole thing, that it gave them a little confidence that their deck wouldn't be just completely awful, because it could only be really so bad.
Yeah, that's true.
Given the card choices. But yeah.
Also important to note at this moment, I think there's a lot of people that don't know that we post the time codes for the main topic in the YouTube description of the video.
After the 10
minutes. I know. So if you're at this point and you're thinking, why won't they just get on with it?
We always post the time codes.
Always post the time codes. Yes. You can skip right to the main topic if you'd like to, which we're getting to. I think. Boom.
Right now. Speaking of which,
did it just happen? Stamp it.
It just happened.
The new Star Wars Destiny.
It's
practically brand new.
It is
honestly
fresh out of the box.
Seriously.
So the thing is, we talked about Destiny, I think 3 or 4 episodes ago, and it was the episode was called After Empire War. And so this was looking at the game after the 3rd set, which is the first year of releases. This is the first set that had been designed after the game had come out, really. We had the 2-player starter. It was like, oh man, there's a whole lot going on. They were just getting started.
Yeah.
So since then, we've had news that Lucas left FFG, the original design of the game. So now, presumably, I don't know this for fact, but
4 Wizards of the Coast.
4 Wizards. Curious
so what's going to happen
see what magic comes out of there. But presumably that means that Jeremy, who was previously the second in command, I guess, on the design team, is now in charge. We also had the announcement of Legacies, which is the next set. It's the first core set, which is, I think, supposed to be in print for the whole year. Has new starters. We also got the announcement of Rivals, which is the draft pack.
That's so crazy.
Box, draft and sealed, officially coming into the game. And last but not least, 2 other things, sorry. We also had the announcement for the first regional season with all the regional locations posted. We also recently, this week, got the first rules reference guide update.
It was more than a rules reference guide, let me tell you.
It was a table flip.
The rules you've been referring to from the rule book, some of them are no longer even in place.
Even apples.
Example?
All right,
Example.
so I'm gonna give you a rundown.
Okay.
We're gonna step by step. I'm not gonna go over the
Hey,
whole thing.
before we do-
Regale me.
Legacy Saga sets up for sale,
Oh, hey,
likely right now, which is a big deal. I think they will have gone up this morning.
Right now?
And probably the starter sets from Legacies.
Starter sets as well, yeah. So all the Legacy stuff has happened. All Empire at War has been done. All Saga sets have been out. So that's all good. And then we've got Empire at War singles should be up by now as well. So on our end, Destiny is, we're ready for the next wave of Legacies and all of that. And so moving into that in Legacies and all of that, like okay, get to the rules reference stuff. Let Robert in on this conversation.
Well, there's a whole lot. So we're going to talk about the rules. We're going to talk about draft and seal. And we're also going to talk about legacies. So first up, FAQ. Just hitting some things because we talked early on about how to. I think it was episode 2 of the cast, how to balance an unbalanced game.
Is Destiny dead?
No, that was the first episode. I think the second was how to balance an unbalanced game.
It's not yet.
It's not
you
still
know?
here.
It's still alive, still kicking.
And so there's some interesting concepts that happened here. The first of which, and I'm curious to get your just general opinions on this, is there was an actual rules change. And not like a rules clarification. So one thing that got clarified is you can discard to reroll dice even if you don't have dice in play. So you can discard to reroll 0 dice. So you can take that action because you can pay the cost, but you don't get the reroll.
No real benefit.
No
Yeah.
benefit. But the reason that is important is they also made a crazy card in the third set called Running Interference, which says after you take an action, you can exhaust this support. Your opponent can't take that action on their next turn.
Yeah.
But the trick is
Just say no.
One action is play a card.
Yes.
One action is activate a card. A character, a support, anything. One action is resolve dice. One action is reroll dice by discarding. One action is pass. One action is claim the battlefield. So
Yeah,
there's
all
this
the
weird
fundies.
combo that could get set up.
Yeah.
You had 2 of them out, where you could make it where they couldn't activate a character and they couldn't play a card. And if you did that before they went, the only thing they can do is pass.
Right.
And if I pass,
they're
the
done.
turn's over.
Yeah.
So we go to the next round. So there's an infinite loop to do 1 damage to just win the game. But they fixed it because you can always just
collectible games.
yeah. You can always just discard a card. That's fine. That's not that major.
Yeah.
But there was a literal rules change, which is both. I want to talk specifically about the change and then whether or not changing the rules is something you should
is
do
it
to balance a
good?
game. The change was previously, anytime you had an upgrade in play, you could play another upgrade from your hand and discard the one that was already there.
Sure.
To reduce the cost of the new upgrade coming into play by whatever the
Proportionately.
original was. So if you had a 3 cost and you played a 4, you only had to pay 1 for it if you discarded the 3. Or if you put a 2 on, it's just free, right? Or a 3.
Can you get net positive back if you put down a 2 for a 3?
That'd be insane. I wish. I don't wish, actually.
Wow, that would be weird.
That would be
a
weird.
totally
Anyways.
different game.
So they have changed the rule on that to allow it to only happen once per turn.
Okay.
So once per turn, you can replace an upgrade. And it's economically speaking in the game, the ability to build resources this way. You can play a 2 cost. On the next turn, you can upgrade it to a 3 or a 4, because you only get 2 resources a turn. So getting the 4 costers out can be difficult if you just have to pay the money for it. So practically speaking, as a player, this addresses a whole lot of problems. And we'll get to the bigger picture. I'm sure I can see Steven just fighting over there.
Cogs are spinning.
The Kantian in me
because
is
from the very beginning.
furious.
Yeah, from the very beginning. Like
Why not everything else?
I've had a problem with Rey as a character, and part of the problem is you get a 2 cost upgrade on her, and this is how you use her at Worlds, and then you can in future turns replace the 2 with another 2 that has ambush, and because of how the interaction works, you get 2 actions for free.
Okay.
Because you just replace the card, and I get 2 actions, and now I can do that once, but once a turn. But previously, it could be boom, boom, boom. I've got 6 actions, go, which is absurd.
Yeah.
The second person that this is really relevant for is FN2119, also known as Nines.
You said FN in the way that I think we're all saying it these days.
FN.
FN 2119.
Yeah, Nines. Nines has an ability that every time you put an upgrade on him, you get to immediately roll the die in. And if you want, you can resolve it. So you play a Vibra Knife, you can roll it in, if it hits a resource or 1 damage.
Or heaven forbid that lethal baton. Jeez.
The baton that can hit for 3.
Goodness.
So by limiting it to once, and with the FN, there was like Balanced Ambition to draw cards back up, and they had Aftermath. Every time a character dies, you get a resource. And so like there'd be turns where he would do 10 or 15 damage from just replacing upgrades on himself. And triggering his ability every time.
No wonder he was in every deck.
Yeah. And
he's like 10 points.
And he's 10 points, which is ridiculous. So They changed that rule
Lucas left.
to make it.
Too soon.
That was a great joke. I wasn't ready. I'm just being serious over here, and you hit it. So they changed the rule, and I think practically speaking, as a player, I am okay with the change. It's something that doesn't come up very often. It's something that if a new player is playing out a starter set, it's not going to be a thing. But in the like complex, constructed style of play, it kind of fixes a couple of the problems,
Right.
and limits the
Fair problems, yeah.
yeah.
All
But
the worst problems it fixes.
I will tell you something.
Let me tell you.
Let me tell you, that little kid. What's your name? What is his mom's name that he's talking to
Who?
in that video?
I know what you're
You
talking about.
What video?
He's
I'm not
like,
even tracking.
he's like, let's say her name's Julia. She's like, Julia, or the little kid wants more dessert. And he's like, Julia, you're not listening to me. And he's like, this 4-year-old just goes. Anyway,
I'm sure I've seen. I just can't recall.
all
right
right,
now.
so the thing I maybe hate more than anything in game design is not changing rules after the fact. Like I think Steven's going to go on that rant. Is limit once per turn anything?
Right.
Because
Oh, don't play L5R, man.
well, yeah, I mean, same thing, right? L5R. I like the inherent you can only do this once per turn kind of thing.
Okay.
But having to track that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Yes.
it's like, did I replace an upgrade this turn?
It's tough.
I don't know. That was 12 minutes ago,
hard.
right? So I'm always cautious
Your
about
turns.
those kind of rules because I just don't like having to keep track of a random. Thrones, it was like in first edition, you can only draw 3 cards a turn. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, by dominance, I don't know how many I've drawn, right? Like, who knows?
Well,
You've been there, right?
Call my Meister and he'll
I don't
tell
know.
me.
What do you guys think about that rules change?
oh man. Well, so that alone, taken in a vacuum, is, I think, troubling because it is a response to badly designed cards. And anytime you set a precedent that we are interested in changing the fundamental rule set of a game that everybody has learned from the rule book and current tutorials that are on the internet, all the data and stuff, all the games out there for any new player to start watching will have a very bizarre experience understanding why in November they are only playing 1 upgrade a turn, and over there in July there were 6 upgrades a turn happening. So I think that becomes a tough thing to overcome and give a lot of sources of confusion going to your first tournament, not understanding that it works this way. So those are the 2 biggest things, is changing a fundamental rule of the game to correct bad design is a problem.
Big one.
And why that's a problem is that the fundamental rules of the game are about as evergreen as you would imagine them to be, right? I mean, FFG's been changing a lot of seemingly evergreen things, but that is the most evergreen thing that you
Don't
can
mess
change.
with my rules, bro.
So, I do have that feeling about it, right? Like, this was a problem that changing FN, changing Ray, would have probably accomplished the same thing. Make Ray 20 points. We already have the balance of the force list now, which we'll get to. Make FN like 80 points. I don't care. Just ban the cards, right? They were bad. We made a mistake. It's awful. So I think this is trying to get around the need to, have people who bought cards that are now less useful, right? So it's like, well, if we do something about Ray and if we do something about FN's ability, then those cards are no longer useful, and the people who bought them as singles, bought boxes and pulled them, now have X amount of value that was immediately reduced to Y amount of value. That happens with collectible games. Live with it would be my take there. But I think it's trying to overcome that challenge and make the cards just as valuable without changing anything directly on them. But there are some good things about it too, right? There's a lot of cards in the game that have, whenever you play this, upgrade abilities. And I think we can see different and better of those abilities now that they can't be abused one after the next. And it could be that there are other reasons to restrict this from happening, whether it's seeing that this is going to cause problems for the game long term, that you can consistently play out new assets one after the next. What are future cards? What are the designs that were being limited by the fact that they could come into play over and over again? So it could, in set 4, 5, and 6, during the design periods of those, it could have been we consistently are running into this wall of our design space is so limited by the fact that this can be used over and over and can consistently be played for free and get its effect like multiple times. So maybe it's solving a problem that we don't even know about yet and also correcting a current problem. if I were a designer and I saw that as a potential solution, I would be tempted to utilize it as well. But I think my biggest concern is changing fundamental rules because cards are bad. That's a problem. Right?
Yeah, but is the inverse as big of a problem? Which is, I mean, if you have the bad cards and they exist, there's no going back and fixing that.
Right.
I mean, the ideal solution.
You can errata them.
The
right?
ideal solution would be not to have made that case. But I would, at minimum, I'm glad they're doing something.
I mean, yeah, it does correct a glowing problem with the metagame at its current point. FN is way too good, has always been. Ray is way too good, has always been. From the beginning of time, from the moment those cards were spoiled, aside from Ray probably because we didn't know how to play. But it's like, what are they doing? Are they getting around the basic fundamental action back and forth of the game? Yes? All right, well then they're too good. I mean, for the point cost, they're crazy.
Yeah, and there's some other like nuanced iterations of why this is a kind of a big deal. Even like Sabine, who can get an upgrade from your discard pile and put it on. A lot of times it would be like, get the DL44 back, remove a die, you have a 3-cost on, later in the round replace with second chance.
Yeah.
And so even that means you can't replace that like the upgrades that don't necessarily have a die.
Yes. So actually you saying that has a new, I think for me, I actually at this point enjoy the fact that there's going to be less combo nonsense for the remainder of
Synergy,
the remainder of the game.
Yeah, for the game's history. So I think I will enjoy the game a lot more with this change.
I totally agree.
But I think the principle at play is the thing that I'm most troubled by.
Sure. Yeah. And they could have, I mean, that could have been the rule from the start.
So yeah.
Mayhaps.
Hand up.
Did I hand up you?
No. I was going to say something. But no, I very much agree. And I even recall people writing in back when FN was first hitting the scene with Spirit of Rebellion and saying essentially that I very much like this game, but these new releases and the new assets, the cards themselves, have changed the paradigm so holistically that what was formerly a hallmark of you do something, I do something, you do something, I do something, as your anecdote panned out into being one of the most fun and enjoyable aspects of the game in a particular tournament ever, which is notable. But they're like, oh, this action cheating nonsense has so fundamentally disrupted what the game is all about, I just don't enjoy it anymore. It is no longer Star Wars Destiny that I was sold on with its First Awakenings release. It is now something else, and I'm out.
And it happens to fix ambush too.
Ooh.
Side note. I mean, you can't stack actions anymore.
Yeah.
You can't continuously ambush.
So yeah, but I very much agree. It's like there's something troubling that seemingly the tail is wagging the dog, that components of a game are dictating what the fundamental rules are, perhaps, to a certain degree.
But
whether the design of the cards was so flawed to begin with that you have to go back and revisit the entire premise that the thing is built around, right?
Yeah,
And,
like,
you know,
Is this what Jeremy's doing?
To be fair, though, like it could also have been, we talk a lot about the fact that you print a tabletop game
Yeah.
and you're set on the rules and you're set on the cards and they're out. And so, like, what are you willing to go back and change? If you're going to go back and change the, if you're going to go back and change the cards with an errata, you can see. I almost would like a more set system. We're about to hit a core set, right? Which is the set 4, which is the evergreen, going to be around for however long set. And if the reality is the rules reference guide just gets updated every year, and this is when it gets updated, is with this set. I'm not exactly against that.
Like you could even, it's essentially a reprinting of the rule book.
It's just like, hey, this is...
Well, it's like a guy, you know, he comes along and he talks to you suddenly about these things called metachlorians, and then they're just never mentioned again. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's just every year we get a chance to revisit what we have said in the past. Right?
But anyways, I do think it faced some problems. There's more interesting solutions that came in the FAQ, though, that I'd like to talk about. One of which is the Balance of the Force list.
Okay.
And this actually hits it where I hope to see games like Destiny and cross my fingers for X-Wing go in the future, which is a Balance of the Force list is a list of characters that are, their point costs have been adjusted. So as an example, Nines, who we were just talking about, not only did the rules change happen with the upgrade thing, he also now just costs 2 more points. Yeah. Straight up, 2 more points. And it's pretty simple.
Drop out of those decks now.
Yeah, he's gone. No, actually, what's funny, at 12 points for a single die, still
worth it.
incredible.
Yeah,
even with the new rules. But that's the thing. Now he's just good instead of like absurd. But additional points, it's really cool to me because I think if in the Phasma that actually comes in the 2-player starter, costs an extra point now.
Yeah. Crazy.
So if you're just buying the starter and playing the game, it doesn't matter that much. Like it's not that important. But when you get to these regional or higher level tournaments and this competitive scene, the ability for them to have a list now where they can update character points and it's a known like check here to check your list.
Yep.
I think is great. I mean,
Yeah.
I would almost go as far as like not even have point cost printed on the characters and then have that constantly changeable and accessible online where you have a problem card and you change it.
They got Fantasy Flight Interactive now, so they could just build an app for
God,
that.
another crazy thing that has happened.
Right?
Build an app for it, yeah.
Build an app
Unbelievable.
for it.
But this is the, it's basically a kind of errata to these characters. It's not changing the card
definitely is,
text, but it's changing the points. And I think this is just
I love it.
a solution.
I mean, you can always, if an ability is too good, you just make the character more expensive until you get it where it needs to be.
This is worth more than it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There
Is
you
it too
go.
efficient? Is it not efficient enough? Like we could have a minus point list if like original Vader becomes too expensive.
The only thing, and this is I sometimes worry about this, but I know that it's a problem that has been solved 1,000 times over. I mean, people are playing Magic for years and years and years with the understanding. I mean, people eventually figured out or understood that you got to do a little bit of homework before you go to a big event, right? So there's a part of me that's like, how devastating would it be to arrive at a regional event or a world's level event or those kinds of things and realize that your characters no longer work together. You've built this deck for months and then they don't work, and you get taken back and you can't play in the tournament and everything falls apart. But I think the reality of that actually happening is very low. Like how...
If you're going to be going to...
unless you're just coming down off the side of the mountain here.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be happening.
Unless, and I think
This
is...
FN guy is great, everybody.
Have you guys seen
How
this?
have you not seen this?
It may also be that, the venues that are hosting these events, we need to be very expressly open about check these documents before you come here. Like, rather than just saying, hey, it's a Star Wars Destiny regional, $20, $10,
Yes.
August 5th, the end. You need to do some homework.
Yeah,
and
it's a little
say,
serious. You need to
players,
come
get
prepared.
informed, and here's what you need to know. Here's the links, those kinds of things.
I also think that's why if you have the once a year's rules reference update and you have a list like this that is updating, let's say every quarter, I think that's what they mentioned for Netrunner. They were going to look at that list every quarter. But if you have these, if it's part of the game, right, that there's this list and it gets updated every quarter. It's just what happens.
Well,
right?
is that going to be in the new rule book?
It should be.
That's what I
mean.
mean.
It's like, hey, go here for the rules reference guide
Yeah.
for updated rules, and there's going to be point cost adjusted from time to time. So just be
hip
sure you
to
check.
it.
I would be so hip to that if they had a section of competitive play and it's like, here's where you go, here's what you check. That doesn't exist now, does it, in the current rule book? And
I haven't read a rule book in years, man.
Who reads?
they may be right in there.
Who reads?
Oh man! All
we
right,
can open this thing up.
And so I opened it, immediately tossed out the rules, and just started looking at the
It's
cards.
like a VCR. You just plug it in and you just start pushing the
seriously,
buttons.
I swear, even I recently got a Fire
Rice
stick
cooker?
for an
Amazon
extra
Fire.
TV. Yeah,
Oh,
Amazon
nice.
Fire. It's like open it up, instructions. Whew,
Yeah.
plug it in, and like hope I figure it out. Right. That's just how I am in general, which is a weakness I understand.
Same as well, but I'm surprised you didn't get with the Chromecast. The Fire Stick?
Hey, I've heard it, but I ran into this. The hotel couldn't use Chromecast at all because they have a gateway on their internet.
But
You have
Fire
to be
Stick
on the same-
works.
But it works. Yeah, it has.
What?
The Fire Stick has a built-in little browser window that opens up and you can plug in your hotel code.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks,
Google better
Bezos.
get with it.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, well,
I'm getting a
I'm
Fire
always
Stick.
nervous about Google, just so we're aware. That's a different conversation. So the last part of the FAQ, they did
Taking our jobs.
some light errata, and I think these were all great. The vibro knife, now the damage is only unblockable when that die is being resolved.
Thank goodness.
So
Not all the damage, just
not
that
all the
die.
damage, and if you get the plus side,
I couldn't believe it
that
was all the damage.
plus the other
It's whenever you're. It used to be when it was just
in play.
in play, then
Yeah.
any damage is unblockable. Now it's when you're resolving that dice specifically, and any dice with it, it's
Okay.
unblockable, right?
Yeah.
So that makes
So-
sense.
Oh
You're-
man, that was even worse than I initially
getting
thought.
a-
That's
getting-
ridiculous.
yeah, it used
Oh
to
yeah,
be-
it would be like, oh, I'm just gonna roll out this character to get that die. in
Another,
now.
again, another game
It's just
fundamental.
under their
Shields?
shields.
Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
And that was actually really detrimental to heroes who've
Sure.
been kind of behind the power curve because so much of their stuff revolves around shields. And it was just a way, I mean, it was
neutral.
two in almost every deck, and
Yeah,
it's like just
one
slide
neutral,
right under the
jeez.
shields.
Man,
Rough time.
that is
And then we had
crazy.
Imperial Inspection that now gets removed from the game when you use it. It's
Yes.
the bounce and upgrade card.
Good.
Great change. We had Heated Battle. It's a 2-cost. We can each change any number of our dice to damage, and now we each can change 2 of our dice.
Okay,
a little
so
little softer.
I mean, it's not worth 2. No way.
And then the weird one to me is it's a trap. Not that weird. I played against him, and at Worlds in the top 16, he was running Lay Akbar, and it was all about it's a trap. And so if you ever left range damage on the table, he'd just smoke you.
Yeah.
Wow.
But because basically it's an ambush event, you play it. You can turn all of your red dice to sides matching one of your opponent's damage sides. So you can just damage it up, and it has an ambush, so you can just kill. They took away ambush,
Just kill.
which I think was enough. But then they also limited it to only 2 dice.
Yeah.
Wow. Heavy nerf hammer on that one.
Yeah, that's no good.
Now, to be fair,
It's fine.
pay 1, change 2 dice to side showing damage. That's
still pretty
at the top of the change dice cards.
This is just Jeremy's brain at work, right?
He's
Isn't
just
that what
restricting
this is?
this.
He's a bit of a, I think he's a bioroid with like directives, like balance all games mathematically. But for those who don't know, also, we talk about, Jeremy and Lucas and these personalities. I don't know if this is normal for other games to be so familiar with the design team that is working on them. Like, does everybody playing Magic, are they aware of the current design team and their
I think he posts a lot of
philosophies?
blogs and has conversations and stuff.
Well, anyway, so Jeremy is he was just a player of LCGs.
Extraordinaire.
And extraordinary.
Yeah.
He would win worlds of any game that he wanted at any
He's won at
choice.
least 5 world championships for 4 different games.
Unreal. So coming into Destiny as first design, venture, you have to know that he understands what makes a card good and what makes a card too good, and the math behind it, right? And when something is too efficient. So I think what we're seeing is literally a cleaning house moment. Jeremy's first real move, going back and saying, these are all the cards that I've ever disagreed with, ultimately. We're going to fix them all, come hell or high water, and then everything moving forward is going to be, he might have a rule that you can only pay, only 2 dice can ever be manipulated with an ability. In his head, he might have that. He might say,
design rule, right?
For every 1 cost a card has, it can only manipulate 1 die, right? So we might be seeing these things start to happen. But I believe in Jeremy.
I mean, here's my thing.
I believe in Lucas with base system design.
That's what I was going to
It's
hit.
always been great.
Lay down the foundations, but I think, no offense, but I always thought that there was a similar aspect at play with the prolific and illustrious Nate French. I thought he had always seemed exceptionally gifted at creating fundamental rule systems at the onset of a game, just as it's kicking off. But when it came to being a designer and making individual cards for that same game, not quite. Like there were cards that would
It's a
creep
totally
out,
different
and
thing,
it's a
right?
different skill set and operation to fulfill on.
Well,
so
that's what, with the 2-player event I was at on Saturday, the thing to me is when you just get to the base game that Lucas designed, this game is remarkably good.
Yeah.
And so I think the real challenge of the development of the game through the card pool is going to be expand the game in a way that doesn't ever take you away from that core game.
Sure.
Yep.
Which can be tough because you want to do the big, exciting, crazy thing.
I don't know, but does
Jeremy
I don't think
doesn't.
Jeremy
This is
doesn't.
the good
Yeah,
thing.
no.
He does not
This is
want
the
to
good
do
thing.
that,
But the trick is you need the big, crazy, exciting when your game's not that great.
Yeah, that's true.
But when your game is just fundamentally fantastic at the core and it's super fun, you just need to let it ride.
Yeah.
Like you just need to let that happen. And that's where I think this is kind of a perfect storm for me of great game, explored a little bit in the first year, reining it all back in.
Yeah.
And
Now
now
new
we'll see
base
where we're
set.
at. And who knows? Maybe 6 months from now, I'll be like, this is so boring.
So you have a new hope?
No, but see,
what I'm
here's the thing though. Like with Destiny, right? If I had that Qui-Gon Rey deck from Awakenings, right?
Which
and
you
I
did.
do, and I do have it.
Mhm.
So that's
Still intact.
just throw that sentence out. But I could play that in that kind of a tournament environment with those exact same decks for probably years and have a great time with it.
At least 7 years.
Like if we had just, I don't think that the expandability is necessary. It's a good aspect to make a game continuously fun, but man, I could play Destiny in its basic form forever. I mean, that's what
Qui-Gon and Rey?
That's all I've ever wanted for Netrunner even, too. It's like, just give me basic Netrunner. I don't need new fancy sparkles. I just need the same thing I was getting out of the core box, right? And so I think that Jeremy might be perfect for this.
Well, so on that note, this actually segues perfectly. And there's 2 things. Remind me later to ask you about Anakin. We'll get there.
And how he gets everywhere?
Yeah, he everywhere.
That's
everywhere. But so I want to talk for a second. If we're talking about the core essence of the game, legacies. So it's the 4 set that got announced. It's the core set, so to speak, with the new starters. And
So what does a core set mean?
A core set...
This is a new thing, right?
It's a new thing. So after Awakenings immediately sold out when it first came out. Then they, a couple months later, announced, hey, we're making more, and also here's how this is going to work in the future. So the last time we're printing Awakenings, we're only printing the set 2 and set 3 one time. So once it's gone, it's gone. Then set 4, we're going to print. It's going to have starters, and we're going to do everything in our power to keep that in print until the next core set comes out.
The next year,
which would
basically.
be set 7.
Oh, set 7, yeah.
So every year, the goal is 3 sets, and then the first set of each year, or each cycle.
It's like your foundational set. You build off it with 2 additionals, and then you replace it with kind of the next one.
Sure. So the first set, we have Legacies, and there's some stuff, right? So we have the core game. There's a lot of stuff being added.
Okay.
And a couple of these as an example.
Tell me.
Introduction of plots. So these are cards that you can bring along with your characters that start in play. They cost points. We've seen some that cost 1, some that cost 2, some that cost 3.
No brainer. I mean, everybody saw this coming
It's the
a mile
classic,
away.
when Palpatine was only 28 points, it's like,
Huh.
what are those 2 extra points for?
That's weird.
So it's kind of like an agenda in Thrones, but it reminds me of Thrones, as an example,
It is a plot
where
card.
at some point, Thrones was like, all right, when we start the game, I search my deck, I put 12 cards over here, and Star Wars CCG was the worst about this. It's like, before the game even starts, I've got 32 cards that I've played.
You've got a 56-page rules reference to work through before you start a game.
That's the intro.
And
That's the intro to the rules reference.
500-page appendix.
Yeah,
You're
for every card in the
redefining
game.
words.
So we have the plot. We also have indirect damage, which is a new icon type.
Yep.
So when you resolve it, instead of choosing where the damage goes, your opponent gets to choose.
Yeah.
So you just do damage, and they get to pick where to put it.
That's because Jeremy was a huge Conquest fan.
He was a huge guy. In the draft starter, which we will get back to on Anakin in a bit, we get neutral characters for the first time. Anakin Skywalker obviously can be light or dark.
That's super cool. I don't know if it's good, but it's cool.
And
He is the black and white cookie.
last but not least, we get 6-point characters. So we've seen
Ewoks.
the
Jawas.
Jawas.
Not the Ewok, but man, I hope they're 5
Jawas.
points.
That's 5 Jawas on the
So
board.
you could technically, they're neutral, so you would only be able to run neutral cards.
Is there
But
a Utini card yet?
No.
no, but I can't wait.
Yeah, I can't wait. With 5.
But right now,
out
right,
there.
you could start the game with 5 Jawas and a plot, technically, if it was 0 points. You have 6 cards on the board before the game even begins.
Yeah.
And so my
like it.
question is, at what point, like, can there be too many die side icons? Can there be too many cards that start the game and play? Do these just add flavor, or are they convoluting the game?
I think they just add flavor. I think if somebody like Jeremy, who seemingly is at the helm and calling some shots here, but based apparently on the basis of some sort of fundamental mathematical pretext in that there is a cost and effect to any card, and that's worth something within the game. And if that isn't maintained in some degree of proportionality relative to everything else, the game's going to get out of whack really quick. So if he wants to start pulling those strings and seeing what permutations to the system you can create outside of just making cards seemingly more powerful relative to others, then to me that's just like, that's Flavor City. And I can finally roll out with 5 weenie Jawas, and they've got a sand crawler that they're just trying to make it home to or something because they're lost out in the desert. I don't know. And they've got their weird like electro shotgun, and it's just like, oh man, that's going to be great. And you know, the military droid, you know, single-handedly or whatever, dispatches all of them.
One thermal detonator.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we get to see like a 6-cost droid, like the droid army, and you have the endless reserves, endless ranks.
As long as there's a foundational balance to what you're doing, then you can have 20 things on the board, right? I don't think that there's a limit to the creativity there, as long as you have some kind of way of measuring whether or not this is comparable to anything you've done in the past, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you have that, like your 5 Jawas, weak to multi-damage, things that affect multiple characters, may be really good against a single Palpatine, which is funny.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be hilarious.
Which is funny.
Great flankers,
or an
right?
angsty customer. This R2 unit is busted.
That's right.
He has a bad motivator.
We got a bad motivator.
He's the real hero of the story, by the way. If he hadn't had a bad motivator,
That's true.
I
Totally
don't think
different
there's
story.
Just stick to the fundies.
Was
though,
that an
right?
R5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just sticking to the
R5s.
fundies. I mean, we already have point costs we're manipulating, so we add some stuff to that, and that's fun. And then you have indirect damage, is just damage that your opponent chooses. That's fine. I mean, it'd be one thing if it's like, reveal 3 random cards from the middle of your deck, and then flip all
Shuffle
3 of
them
them
back
up,
in 3
and then
times.
put them all into play for a turn, and then put them back in. And this is an ability called like surprise or something. Like there are ways to get a little too gimmicky with it, but this is straight up. It's
Seems
damage. It's point
pretty
cost.
fundles.
Yeah.
So, any other initial Legacies reactions? So they have the new look, right? It looks like this.
Well,
It has
draft
the-
and sealed.
Well, that was a separate thing. Well, let's go there. So draft and
Legacies,
sealed.
right? Are we talking about Legacies?
Well, draft and sealed was announced separately from
was it?
Legacies.
That's right.
That is true.
There's the new
He's right,
starters.
He's right.
I
Oh,
pay
yeah.
attention.
Oh.
So they had the announcement. It had like the Obi-Wan Kenobi in it, and we saw the young Luke and the young Han, and we saw Boba Fett for the first time.
These are all the
Boba
iconic characters.
we saw the R2 die. We've seen kind of a little clip of the Yoda die.
This is why we're calling it the new Star Wars Destiny, because I really do feel that at this point we are out of the beta test of the game in a lot of
Year
ways.
one.
They're showing us all of the classic iconic characters. There's a new episode movie coming out for Star Wars. They've got their packaging on lock. Everything's white with red lettering.
But even I
It's a
was
core set.
Speaking of,
I wonder if that's the theme for the year.
Yeah, it could be.
having the presence or even preponderance of new rather than old characters, or vice versa. How much of that is contractually stipulated? Because again, this is
that's a good question.
a Disney asset, and because they've got a new, thriving brand that they have rehabilitated, suffice it to say, they want to keep people mindful of the new shiny hotness, which is new episodes, new standalone Star Wars story movies, all these kinds of things. So it's like we need to see as many old and new characters, or new to old, that kind of a thing. So
you can't just have only Yoda and Obi-Wan, because
exactly.
they're not what we're marketing
We
right
do
now.
need FN in there. We do need Phasma and Kylo Ren, all those people.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
Rey
And
and all
I
that.
think it'd be true.
Sure.
It's undoubtedly true.
So-
Right? I mean, that's
Disney's way too smart and aware of those kinds of considerations.
we've heard all sorts of stories about Disney. We're out hearing about Lucasfilm and Disney and the amount of like approval that has to go through anything that goes through that whole system.
They're very much involved and on top of everything that they own and control.
I've seen
Suffice it to
documentaries.
say. Yes.
I've seen an episode of a documentary. So next question for me, I was really excited just in general about the Legacies announcement. The cards look great. They seem very well thought, like well balanced.
I didn't see any action cheating stuff. Did you?
No, I don't think so.
Wait for it.
And we had all the new stuff we talked about that was added. And then they went and dropped the draft starter from the sky onto us, which regardless of what was in it, I would be very excited. I've said it multiple times that draft and sealed, I think, are fundamentally part of a collectible game. Yet, I got more excited because they had a neutral Anakin Skywalker, which literally means I can have Anakin or Vader in every list that I want to run.
Yeah.
And I can quote him all the
I
time.
can't imagine anything more
That's the real
boring to
treat.
me than that.
Well, you should.
Principle.
You
Can you,
should.
can you get a soundboard and just press buttons?
It gets everywhere.
It gets everywhere.
No,
You know I like you?
The thing I was going to ask you, which
I
is-
hate them.
I actually think you're talking about Qui-Gon Rey deck. The Qui-Gon Anakin deck is infinitely better.
Oh yeah, but Anakin's the most boring character on earth to me, honestly. I mean,
Yes.
it's just overdone. But
So
here's hold on though. Draft and sealed. This is not something to just like. This is I think the fundamental moment where the future of the game and the health of the game to me is not questioned anymore. I think the number of players who only play draft or sealed in any kind of collectible game is high. It's a large amount of.
Or they
I'm one
do
of
that
those
to
players.
get their cards.
I'm one of those players. I want a limited card pool. I want an equal footing for everybody. I want to engage in a very basic, fundamental game of this thing. And then what you find is that over time, as you draft and play in sealed tournaments more and more, you get product. And now, well, I got enough. I can build this. I can take this
trade
deck
it
and
to
make
get
it
the
better.
things you want.
Or you can just get value back from your buy-in on the tournament and sell your cards to your friends, trade them away. So I don't think a collectible game can make it without a draft and sealed format. And so it seems like I'm amped because that's what I want to play. More than constructed, I want to play draft and sealed.
Well, and to clarify for anyone that isn't familiar, the draft starter is a one-time purchase, and it comes with a neutral character that can be light or dark for all 3 colors.
Yeah.
It also comes with a 6-point Jawa, which is a
Just
neutral.
by 5.
He's a neutral, so he has no color, colorless neutral, so light or dark. It also
favorite
comes
color.
with, I think, 15 or 20 cards that you get to pair with whatever you draft or have in sealed.
Yeah.
And the official format is 6-pack draft, 8-pack sealed.
Yeah.
So sealed will be you open 8 packs, you build a deck out of the starter plus that. draft will be you have 6 packs, you open 3 at a time, and you do a standard draft. Pick a card, pass left, and then second time around, pick a card, pass right.
Cool.
And you build decks. And I agree. I think it is a fundamental part of a game like this. And one of the most deceptive things about Destiny to me is that you only need 2 of each card, and the sets are small enough that you can actually feasibly get away with owning everything.
Yeah.
You could technically buy 2 saga sets, you could buy a bunch of boxes, you could buy singles. I think you have 2 of every card in the game forever, and a lot of people could feasibly do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I have never played a collectible game until Destiny where that was even close to feasible.
Yeah.
Because they would have 200 or 300 card sets 4 times a year, which is more cards more often. You could have 4 of each of them in your deck. And also there were rares that were just way rarer than the other ones.
They wouldn't even tell you.
Yeah.
Or
So-
sometimes they would. They'd call them ultra rares or something.
I
and it's
just-
like,
I
yeah,
Or
remember-
the foil now, or
whatever
yeah.
thing, right? So I remember growing up, it was like we would each buy like a box, and then we would share. And then when we were going to a big tournament, we'd buy singles to complete the decks.
Yeah.
And it was like, and that was it. And we played draft and sealed and stuff.
Yeah.
And so for people that are now getting 3 or 4 sets into Destiny and having the realization of what it really means to collect, to catch them all, so to speak. I think draft and sealed is going to be super critical. The card pool is getting big enough. New players will have a way to get in that isn't buy all the cards.
Yeah.
And so I'm also just looking forward to it. We've had our own draft tournament for a while here, and I really enjoyed that. And having, I think, a actual
Formal
format.
one. Yeah.
Legitimized,
I'm crossing my fingers. I hope they have it at Worlds, like as a real world.
It needs to be
world
a supportive
championship.
format.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it definitely
for
needs
sure.
to be a supportive format. Even if they do the winner of the constructed Swiss then goes to a sealed top 8 or a sealed top 16. I love tournaments like that. I don't know that that's necessarily the best way to do it because, like, you know, you came to compete at constructed, so why am I having to do both? But having an overall tournament or even just having separate draft and sealed.
I mean, what have you had your constructed world championship? You had your sealed world championship, and then like the top 8 from each do a draft.
I love that.
And then it's like
I
you have
do
an
that.
overall champion.
I do
as
that in
well.
a heartbeat,
That's super
yeah.
cool. All right, so we have all this happening. So much I could go on for a long time about this. I'm really excited. And by the way, all of my decks just got trashed. Like,
Yeah, it's a good feeling.
It's
in
great.
a
So
lot
you
of
running
ways,
busted
but-
cards?
oh yeah. Come on, man. Now,
Look at the
you know,
win.
it's even things like I think one of the best decks was Baby Vader and the new Phasma. And they made Phasma 1 point more, which makes that not work. Or 1 point more, I think.
That new Phasma was crazy, though.
New Phasma was so efficient. And it wasn't that it was like, it
ridiculous.
was just doing so much damage. Anyways, last question for me is, we've kind of, the stage has been set. What do you think the next year of Destiny needs to look like for this game to just continue being immensely successful?
Continue being immensely successful is something that people would argue with, actually.
It hasn't been immensely
Because
successful.
how do we
I heard it
know?
was
I mean,
dead.
how do we know what immensely successful is? I mean, it's so hard to get actual numbers.
And even like per the podcast that we had previously, defining success is problematic in its own right. But I would at least hazard something to the effect of further stabilizing / legitimizing the significance, the gravitas, what have you, of the game itself that makes it translate itself from being yet another, shall we say, Star Wars title to being definitively an excellent card game that happens to be under the Star Wars banner.
Yeah.
And that you'd be a fool to pass it up or to not give it a try, something like that.
How do they do that over this next year? How do you ingrain that?
They gotta be really solid on their development and releases, the availability of product. I mean, it's comprehensive. Magic certainly had its own fair share of weirdness in its early days, but it eventually got to a point where everyone's like, conventions are established. I know what the fundamentals of the game are, and I can continue buying into and playing with all these new releases. I think Destiny has to do something similar.
And I think when we talked about this success or failure of a game previously, the key metric on when a game starts to not be successful is when you have less people getting in than you have getting out.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that with a new core set, I think Legacies looks great. I think a 2-player starter was a great release for this game. And then the draft and sealed. I really hope they just triple down on, I know locally here we're going to be going ham on draft and sealed because it is so important for getting new people in, and it is something that even competitive players can enjoy, and then you balance that with constructed competitive kind of stuff. So what, what does have to be done to make sure that math keeps adding up, right? How do they make sure people keep walking in faster than they're leaving? And I think if you make a really great game, if the development is really good, if you keep the game really fun, if you keep the card pool that you previously bought active and like usable, if you give great ways for new people to get in, and then I would love to see just a lot of support, whether that's that could be a lot of ways, right? Whether you have the tournament kits that are happening, the quarterly kits, you have World Championship, maybe you have like an Open Series style event like you did with X-Wing for Destiny. But there's a lot of creativity that could go there because I think
organized play angle.
Organized play, I think, could be
like a Friday Night Magic kind of
100%
play.
Even like imagine the Friday Night Sealed Draft kit, and it's like, do you have a monthly new kit that is getting people to come out and play Draft and Sealed every week in these stores? Because I think that is, and obviously the kind of the catch-22 they were in is the game first came out and they didn't have nearly enough product.
Yeah.
And so even if you start, let's do Draft and Sealed and push people to do Draft and Sealed, no one's got product to Draft and Sealed with.
Yeah.
So that's irrelevant in general. But if it were me, I would put all in on Draft and Sealed.
Okay.
Like I think Constructed, with the changes that have happened, as long as you keep consistently putting out cards that are good and not totally upsetting, like ruining the card pool, so to speak, or even if it does, fixing it thereafter. Constructed kind of takes care of itself to me.
Yeah.
Outside that, it's all Sealed and Draft.
All right, so I think a couple of examples. One is we've got our friend James over next door. There's a coffee shop next door that he works at. So he got into Destiny. Do you remember how he got into Destiny? What the ultimate?
He had gotten into a couple board games.
Yeah. He had like a normal group that he played board games with.
Yeah, and then he started asking questions when we would get coffee every day about what we do over here. And then he looked, and I don't know how he found Destiny. I think he just
got
came
a couple
in.
of starters.
Yeah, got some starters.
Played it with that board game group. Got at least one other person very interested, and then has played. But then here's the thing, though. Like for us at that point, so James has a couple of starters. What is the next step? It's like essentially our answer is come into a tournament, meet the community, get kind of meet everybody. And he came in and he played with a couple of great people. Yeah, Mark being one of them. Taught him everything. They had decks that were just crushing him, right? But it was a kind, welcome to the party kind of a thing. And so then after that night, like what happens? Buy a couple of boosters, try to make decks better, get crushed again. Now we can say we have a Draft or Sealed tournament. Come to this. This is where everybody's on the same playing field. You know the game, so come in and play with us. So that's really important to have. That's why that's so important.
It's an equalizer.
Secondarily, I think that if we didn't see this kind of a big shakeup, I don't think that Destiny would have made it another few years. Like I think we're kind of at it's going to go
plateau.
It's going to go up or down at this point. Like I do feel that, and I think that this is everything that was needed to make it go up.
Yeah.
And the reason that I say that is that we have Christmas about to happen. We've got a perfect entry point in the 2-player starter and the new starters. They look great. They look great on a shelf. They're very easy to give to interested parties.
They don't fit in a stocking.
For Christmas, they do not fit in a stocking. So we've got...
Be big. It'd be big.
My mom
or
has
stretchy.
I presume Legacies is out by Christmas. Is that fair? Is that true? We don't know that, do we?
Rumor mill.
Rumor mill says it probably is. So we've got a Christmas rush. We've got the core set for the first time is actually happening. We've got Draft and Sealed coming into play. Basically, all of these things are happening to where I think this is what it needs to kind of hit the jet booster. So a lot of people get this product for Christmas, over the holidays, play it with friends, family.
Like, we're heading into regional world championship season,
Yeah.
so the competitive angle's happening.
Yeah. So it's just kind of starting to, we've got it.
But that's
we're
what
there.
I think with all of that, it's like, if you really reinforce the Draft Sealed, I think that's how you put the gas on new players.
Yeah.
Because there's people
Constructed happens naturally after that.
Yeah.
Right?
So there were definitely people that got in originally. Set 2 comes out. It's lots of action chaining, lots of 9s in Ray and all this kind of stuff. Imperial Inspection, that whole thing. And then that is potentially when they were like, well, I don't know if this is for me anymore. This isn't the game I thought it was. And now we kind of have a return to that. And it's like, well, if you weren't buying the past 3 sets, how do you get in? And I think that is the people that are still in, I don't think they're going anywhere.
Right.
I think the game just got awesome. I think we're about to get another set. It's going to get more awesome. And I'm confident in that. I don't think the attrition is going to be high. The trick is whether or not the addition is going to happen.
Yeah.
That is where I think the magic happens right now.
And certainly the lowest hanging is people who have played the game probably during Awakenings and then didn't want to keep up because the new cards were not their style. Well, now it's like you can reclaim those players really quickly with Draft and Sealed and these new starters.
We obviously don't know what all is in the set 4, but if the reality is these changes, these rules changes that happen, make it so that someone can buy Legacies and actually be good and compete without having to buy the rest of the catalog, I think that's also very important.
Yeah. And the final piece we're missing is a Star Wars movie. Same
That's
time.
right.
This is all happening at the exact same time.
Check this out.
Did you check that trailer out? Whew.
Oh, were you gone when that happened?
I was.
We haven't talked
Jonathan
about
has
that.
a lot to say about that trailer.
Okay.
After this cast, maybe we'll do a secret cast episode for the podcast people only.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Movie,
no,
Christmas,
check this
starters,
out.
Draft
Check
Sealed.
this out.
What else can you do?
all right, so let's say Legacies
Wanna
comes
watch
out
it.
in December. Then we get episode 8. Then we have Christmas, which is great. Then we should, if Christmas release is them returning to the original schedule, which is like December, April, August, we get another set in April. We have Worlds in May. We have regionals happening all in the January through April phase. And also in May is the Han Solo movie.
Wow. Okay.
So all the
we've
Star
got it.
Wars.
I'm
Yeah,
booked.
This is, I mean, if there's going, if
can't keep
there's,
up with this.
I don't know what you could do realistically without moving mountains to give your game a better shot. At this point, I mean, there's design it better. You know,
I
don't have busted cards.
This is it, right?
Those
But
kinds
this
of things,
is it's crazy. But I actually think that
advertise.
outside of the launch, outside of launching, this is probably the most important 5 or 6 months in Destiny. Will either go start the down or go way up.
Tanker
I think
bank?
on this 6-month period.
I think this will definitely make it.
Make or break.
I'm so confident. I would put it at 95%.
Repeating.
And again, I mean, we sell the game, so like I could be saying that just to convince people to buy it. But I genuinely believe that this game at this point will happen. I mean, I think it might have the magic to actually get up there with
Disney's
with the
making
big
it,
ones,
So
with the big collectibles.
As someone who very much enjoys playing this game, I hope you're correct.
may the force
I won't
be
bet
with
against
us.
you. All right, we're going to move on to questions. You can use the hashtag AskCovenant. We'll answer your questions on the show. And we're only going to do one this time because we went a little
we
long.
talked too long.
Yeah, we
We're
did.
chatty
Sorry.
Cathy's.
And this is from Kyle. Looks like on YouTube. He said,
Raw Kyle, please.
Raw Kyle, sorry. I just saw Kyle. That's what I went. Raw Kyle.
He's raw. He's not medium. Not well done.
With a nice little espresso heart. That's his
Gordon
personal
Ramsay
reason.
fan.
Anyways, I would have liked you all to have answered the question of how are you personally Team Covenant, which
Corporations are
he says
people.
personally and then specifically calls out Team Covenant.
Corporations are people.
Is he talking about me as a person or me as part of Team Covenant? Anyways, responding to
How
the
we.
Kickstarter problem. So that was last week's
Who's we?
topic. Especially considering that you have a brick and mortar store, I don't blame you, but you seemed a little biased against Kickstarter in this episode, which makes sense given that you were on the FLGS side.
I was pro Kickstarter, wasn't I? I thought I liked Kickstarter.
I think it's just a mixed bag inherently, but I also just think that you know, for me personally, if nobody else is familiar, I never will be able to forget it. I don't think it's like one of those memories that just happens to be perfectly crystallized in my memory. But Steve Horvath, I think, was at Gamma this year, and he was fielding questions from, I believe it's just like industry time, store owners,
I
etc.
think it's a heavier retail focus.
Yes, thank you. And people were asking something to the effect of other entities doing Kickstarter, utilizing it, and he, you know, just responded, I think, very succinctly, saying that, you know, we think you should have skin in the game. We have skin in the game. That's part of, I think, the passion that is catalyzing for quality product and, you know, longevity in everything they're doing. And it's not just kind of like a lark whenever you're chasing something or doing work on it, that you're in for the long haul. And I think that manifests in more ways than most people might or otherwise think to be aware of. So I think that there's just so much with Kickstarter that you lose out on if it's something that becomes perhaps too much of a mainstay within the industry.
Mm-hmm. So what are we doing as a brick and mortar store? I mean, I'll just lay it out on the line. I mean, we're looking at ways to make the experience here better and get away from, you know, needing those traditional product chains to work for us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, can you, like a good example is we've got the board game cafe model, right? You've got drinks and snacks, and that's where a lot of that revenue comes from. So you can bring your Kickstarter game into a brick and mortar store, and they're not relying on you buying product to stay in business. And I think that of all retail these days, you have to look at models that are capitalizing on the human experience in the room, because Amazon's going to conquer it all. I mean, they're going to take the whole thing.
That's true.
Or somebody like Amazon will be even better at those kinds of things. So a retail store of any kind at this point had better be thinking about what gives value to people being in that room with you, because it ain't the product anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that as a brick and mortar store, that's it. As an online store, I mean, we're just trying to do the best that we can with the games that are certainly not being kickstarted right now, right? That's why the LCGs are so awesome, because we can capitalize on the fact that these products are being released in a traditional way. People are acquiring them in traditional means, and like that's great. And so we're favoring games that are not coming out with 7,000 expansions having gone through a Kickstarter. And so you're going to see other retailers doing that, right? So is there going to eventually be a divide where retailers don't want to carry products that have a long Kickstarter head start? And is there going to be a reaction to that where Kickstarter products are no longer being carried outside of the Kickstarter itself? And will that have kind of an effect on who uses what and how that all goes? So I think we're in for a ride. I think it's going to be interesting.
We'll see how it
Yeah,
plays.
I mean, I think the next 20 years, not just in tabletop, but in retail in general, is going to be fascinating. I think that's what makes tabletop so interesting to me, is that it is inherently a medium that requires the physical.
It does.
And you know, there's the digital announcement from FFG even. Maybe they put all their games digitally. Maybe they just make video games. Who knows? But there is something special about sitting across the table from someone and interacting in the same activity, especially a game. And we'll see how it all shapes out in the next 15, 20 years.
We're here to lose or win.
All right,
And
you can use.
it's on us. Yeah.
It is on us. That's right.
You can use the hashtag AskCovenant to get your questions answered on the show. And before we get out of here, I have a question for you. We'd love to have you answer it in the comments below.
Use hashtag AskCovenant. That's how we find them.
That is exactly how we find them. What do you hope to see happen in the second year of Star Wars Destiny? Until next time, keep playing.